welcome everyone. This is dance coach Rudy. Welcome to my chat. This is my first chat that I'm creating here. Um, so if you just enter this, if you're just seeing this video, go down below and you can reach me at my Instagram. You can add me and send me some messages if you're interested in dance coaching, if you want to learn, you want to join some dance classes, you want some private dance lessons. I'm out here in the San Fernando Valley and in San Fernando Valley, California, and definitely send me a message and also go down to my link below. You see it scrolling right there. That's my link, or you could click on it below in the details if you want to learn more about what I do and what dances I teach. Actually, been a dancer for a long time since I was a kid in the 80's, and I started off as a popper and a break dancer in the 80's during the golden era, and also became a 90's house dancer in the club scene. And then later on, I started taking up a lot of the Latin dances, swing, rockabilly, jive. So I have tons of experience dancing, and then became a dance instructor as well. And I teach dance for many reasons. You know, for a fun activity. It's an art, it's fun. It's good for your health. It's good to get the cardio going, to get the blood pumping and start moving your muscles. It's good for your brain. Lots of health benefits to dancing. But even just enjoying it in general, you socialize, you come across a dance community, you meet new people, all that stuff. So today, also, oh, my bad. Actually, if you want to join my chats, definitely, you know, join my chats and send me some questions related to the topic. And if you want to come on video, message me here in my chat, and I'll send you the link, and you can come and join the conversation. And just keep it respectful, positive, no weirdos, no cussing, and just stick to the topic and keep it civil. So today's topic is called popping and breaking in the 80's in the San Fernando Valley, the 818s. Yeah. So I want to talk about this because a lot of times when you hear about popping and breaking, you hear about everybody else's perspective, like especially out here in Los Angeles. Usually you hear a black perspective on things, or you hear from like in certain parts of Los Angeles, right? Um, the 818 San Fernando Valley is part of Los Angeles County and is considered Los Angeles, but we have our own history as well out here. And I'm actually going to give you a perspective from me because there are other poppers and breakers that come from the San Fernando Valley too, as well. And they have their particular experiences and in their take on the history. But so my take on this is, you know, from my experiences, like I used to pop and break back in the 80's, back in the golden era. And then later, like I started exploring other dances. But when I came into back to the popping scene, I came across people who were saying that, oh, there's if you're not doing a certain style, then it's not popping, right? Or oh, there was no breaking and popping in the San Fernando Valley back in the 80s, in the 818. Sometimes you get that kind of perspective. And I know it's not true. And sometimes, these people that are saying that stuff they don't know my history and my experiences. So you can't tell an old school guy from the 818 that, there was no breaking and popping back then, because there was. There's a lot of us doing that back out here in the 80s. And so let me give you a little take on my history and my perspective. And for some of you youngsters out here, you know, when you hear about all these other OGs out here giving their perspective, claiming they created everything and this and that. Well, let me tell you, you know, it's hard to pinpoint where exactly certain styles of dance actually came from, because you go down history, you're gonna see a lot of dance was there's interrelated, interconnected. Some people were influenced by other dances in the past, and sometimes people just stumble across certain dances and just create them, right? So that is a whole issue in talking about who created popping, who created breaking, you know. Um, but we can kind of pinpoint people who were there, doing certain styles of dance early on, whether they are the creators or not. Sometimes they claim they're the creators, but they're not, right? Somebody else that they learned it from, you know. So, from my perspective, I say there's people. Creation is always happening. Every time someone dances, right, you have your own unique twist to it. Unless you're just being a copycat, right, or what they call a biter, right? But even at times when other people learn from other people, they go under a certain popper or breaker and they learn from them. Yeah, they need to give credit to that person, right? But also say the person starts creating new moves, new styles, and all that. Now they become a creator too. See? So creation is always happening, right? With each individual. So, like, I would like to go on and say that in my early years as a kid in the 80s in the San Fernando Valley, there was different neighborhoods out here. You have everybody thinks of the San Fernando Valley as, oh, it's white, right? Or they think of the Valley Girls, right? But there's a certain part of the San Fernando Valley that is not white, that has a lot of brown people, right? Some black people as well. And me growing up and say in the east, what they say, the kind of like the east side of the San Fernando Valley, um, in areas like Pacoima and San Fernando. This is where a lot of brown folks lived, right? And some black people lived in Pacoima during the 80s, right? And as a kid, like we obviously growing up in our neighborhoods, we would there was this whole a lot of people were starting to get into breakdancing and popping, right? And it was becoming real popular. Everywhere you go in the San Fernando Valley, you go to schools and people are breaking and popping. You go to hospitals, you see people doing flips and popping and breaking. You go to malls and everything, people are popping and breaking. out here in the San Fernando Valley. Let me get into details of all my experiences, and maybe you guys can kind of get a picture of what was actually happening in the '80s during the popping and breaking scene. So, um, my experiences is that in elementary school, a lot of kids were already, they were already practicing. I actually, you know, was practicing, and sometimes we would teach each other, right, different moves and everything. I remember this one kid was doing glides, right? If you know what glides are in the popping scene, a lot of people kind of know what the moonwalk is, or what they say the original term is backsliding. Um, but it's kind of like the moonwalk, but you're doing it kind of like side to side or like in circles, So I actually seen this one kid doing that, and I was like, oh man, that's cool. Like, and I actually wanted to learn that. So he started showing me how to do it. So I started learning how to glide all the way back in elementary school in the '80s. And this was like early '80s. Could have been like around maybe um, 83, 82, around that area, around that era. So there was, kids, we were already gliding. And then in elementary school, I had a friend who used to break dance, and he used to spin on his hands. And there was a funny thing that would happen. Like every time the teacher would start writing on the board, my friend would just like jump off his chair and start spinning on his hand. He would grab a piece of paper, right, that you write on they gave us, and he'd start spinning on his hand. And then as soon as the teacher, like everybody started laughing, he would jump back on his chair, and then the teacher would look back and say, "Hey, what's happening here?" And she wouldn't know, right? So it was my friend that used to always spin on his hands, and he would like actually, I would want to also try to spin on my hand. I learned from him, and he would do what they call turtle walks and everything with the hands. So I was into that, because of my friend. So those are my early experiences, and then me growing up in church. There was a lot of us kids back then who were into the breakdancing, the popping. Back then, rap was pretty popular, you know, and even in church, we would practice breakdancing, graffiti, um, and a lot of us used to live amongst around each other too. So we used to form groups, and we would just start breakdancing and popping, even in our own neighborhood. And so we had Mexican kids, we would have black, um, Samoan, a lot of, you know, uh, people of color, right? A lot of Mexicans, though. A lot of Mexicans were into breaking and popping too back then. So everyone thinks it's just black, right? It's all about black, like black history. No, Mexicans were involved in that history early on too, and I'm actually one of them too. Um, Although they say breaking and popping came earlier decades, but the golden era, a lot of times it got famous during the '80s, right, and early '80s, and so us kids, we would bust out with cardboards in the neighborhood. Some of us would have boombox, and we would break dance and just practicing, And there's even a story where I was at my friend's house, and I was on the wall, right, and I was over here trying to tut, right, and I was trying to tut. I don't know, you can't even see here, but I was over here trying to tut, and I was trying to do it on top of a wall. And then what happened is I missed my step and I fell over into a rose bush. And man, it's like my tutting experiences was like, wow, I just fell right flat on my back and right into a rose bush, and I actually like got cut all over my arm, and I was bleeding a lot. So breaking and popping, you got to be careful up there. uh, so yeah, so that was one of my experiences, and so I got into popping and breaking. I kept practicing it with my friends and all that. There was a whole social movement fad. We practice our graffiti. Back then, the graffiti was like bubble letters. You know, now it's all fancy. They got wild style and all these other crazy styles out here. It's evolved, right? Back then, it was more like bubbles and maybe some of the block type graffiti. You know, we would have some little characters that we write on there too. And yeah, it's just that kind of history. I was more into like waving. A lot of us were wavers back then. We'd do robot and waving, you know, um, what they call animation, early on. But there's so many styles to popping. I mean, but out here in the San Fernando Valley, a lot of us were doing like waving, tutting, robot, animation, those styles right there, gliding, you know. And when you came out here in the San Fernando Valley back in the 80s, right now the trend, I remember like coming back to the popping scene, a lot of people were doing that boogaloo style, right? A lot of the boogaloo. And and when I came back to the popping scene, I wasn't really familiar with. I was kind of familiar with the boogaloo style a little bit. I saw it in the house scene, like especially amongst freestylers. Sometimes they would do a lot of the hip rolls and the chest rolls, and sometimes what they call like spaghetti legs and stuff. Uh, I seen that, but I wasn't familiar with the term of it being called boogaloo, right? So when I came back to the popping scene, I started seeing a lot of people doing the boogaloo style. So I was a little familiar with it, but not like as much in terms of popping. See, back in the 80s, we grew up mostly doing out here the robot and waving and tutting and gliding, animation, stuff like that. And so I came back to the popping scene and I was like, well, why is everyone just doing boogaloo? I'm like, and then it's like, oh, interesting. And then they were saying, oh, boogaloo is the only form of popping, right? Everything else is not popping. I had a problem with that. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not correct. You know, back in the 80s, we were doing all this waving and tutting and, animation and gliding. And, there was even other styles too, you know. Sometimes we would do those, what's it called? Those, I think it's kind of like the whole, there's these Greek, kind of like these Greek mythology movies. We try to act like different creatures and everything. Sometimes they would move around, or sometimes there was like miming too. So I had an issue when I came back to the popping scene. It's like, oh, okay, all these boogaloo people and everything, and then it's like, and then they're saying if it's not boogaloo, it's not popping, and I had an issue with that. So then I came across like a website called, I think it was West Coast Poppers or something like that. And I went on there and I was like, and then I saw all these guys and they were getting in arguments and debates. And some were from I guess, the Boogaloo Funk Styles camp. And then the other ones were like from the old school LA style out here. A lot of them were wavers, roboters, um, you know, um, they tutting, uh, animation, just different things like that. And they were getting debates. And I kind of jumped into that debate too because I'm from the old school. I grew up in that '80s era, right? And I know about it. So I came on there and I was debating people too, and especially these youngsters. A lot of these youngsters, what they do is they go and learn popping in a dance studio, and then someone gives them their version. Oh, boogaloo is the only style, right? Or the only style of popping, or the electric boogaloos created popping, right? Every other style is like, okay, it's not considered popping, or it's not it's not called popping, right? So so these youngsters go and learn that from their perspective, and I'll give credit where credit is due, though. Electric boogaloo's, they're I like their style. They're pretty dope, and I actually adopted some of their stuff. I've taken some classes with them and everything. And I would say I like their style, their popping style. I like how it's very like energetic, and they move around, and they go different angles, and it's pretty dope. And I'll give them credit for that. And I will even admit that uh, maybe some of the electric boogaloos did create certain styles in popping. But then there's a whole debate about that. It's like, okay, Northern Cali there was people popping before them, and so that's a whole debate right there. You know, and so every time an old school OG comes out, they it's like the narratives change. It changes. And so it's like, okay, who's the real creator of everything? So, but I'm not hating on the electric boogaloos. And I mean, I actually admire Poppin' Taco, who's a brown Mexican, um, popper who knew waving, innovator. Rest in peace, Poppin' Taco. Waver, and he did Cobra style. Really, he also did the Boogaloo style too. So uh, I respect the whole art of popping. You know, it's like, okay, you're doing tutting. You have a if you're a tutter, mainly a tutter. I'm like, okay, that's dope. As long as you look dope, I'm like, okay, that's cool. If you're a waver, or or you're a robot type, or a glider, or even if you're doing some of the boogaloo styles. I think they used to call it the puppet. I actually like the puppet style, like that puppet style, and the scarecrow. Yeah, it's pretty dope stuff. But I have to give my perspective though out here from the 818s, and we were popping out here. We were breaking out here. You know, I even have other old school friends of mine. Hamburger Helper, right? AKA DJ Hayes. Me and him actually, we do, we have sessions popping out here in the San Fernando Valley. Hayes been doing it he's been having his Hayes Hip Hop Center for a while. He's been involved in a lot of old school popping and b-boying history, part of the Air Force crew, all that stuff. And I've also have some history as well, all the way back then in the 80s. I was in crews back then, like, it's a group of us kids, and sometimes we would go to and battle other crews at times. And we would go over there to Santa Monica and Venice Beach and all that, and different parts of the valley, and just start breakdancing and popping against other people. It's fun times, right? And we used to always, a lot of us, even back then, there was a whole K Day thing on the AM radio, right? The first rap station ever. I thought a long time ago the first rap station was from New York, but it wasn't. So actually out here in the West Coast. Hamburger Helper, DJ Hayes even told me about that. Like because he was part of the K Day. He was a DJ from the early K Day era, and he was telling me that he says New York had like shows, but they didn't actually have a radio station. You know, and K Day was the first one, and we had brown DJs like what's his name, Tony G. You know, who paved the way right there. You know, and you had you know brown people have always been there in hip hop history, popping history, breaking history. Not only in East Coast, obviously you had the Puerto Ricans with the b-boying, right? But out here in the West Coast too. So I'm actually giving you a Chicano brown perspective too on this history. Chicanos, brown folks, we were involved in this popping history, b-boy history. You know, we also influenced, we also created, we also paved the way out here in this West Coast history of popping and breaking out here. And a lot of people don't even aren't even aware of that. You know, we were involved in that. And we're still involved in that history, popping and breaking. And but yeah, so the '80s was a fun time. We used to, some of us would wear Converse with fat laces. Sometimes the fat laces would be checkered with fluorescent colors. Matter of fact, um, I went to a Mexican store around my neighborhood, and they're still selling some of those. I was like, whoa, shoot! I remember wearing those as a kid. I wear them with my Pumas or Adidas, and we would wear like sometimes Nike jumpsuits or Puma jumpsuits, back then with our Puma shoes and the fat laces, right? We have our ghetto blaster, our cardboard, bust out with the cardboard, start breaking and popping. Those were fun times back then. And the way I am is like, okay, I still preserve that history. I still preserve that popping history. I'm no longer a break dancer, right? Because as you get older, it's like it could be kind of hard on your body, right? Although I do practice some basic footwork and everything. I just, I used to spin on my head and do all these egg rolls and all that, but I kind of avoid that now. But I just do a lot of different types of footwork, whether top rocking, up rocking, or when I'm on the floor, just, doing different types of footwork. It's good exercise, by the way. But I mostly pop to keep it, to keep it safe. I'm more of a popper, waver, tutter, glider, and I try to mix it up. And yeah, it's just, but definitely, um, and I'm also part of the hip hop popping culture out here. A lot of us have, we have sessions, we have, and we're just popping and and just working on that. And now the whole popping and breaking scene has evolved. It has evolved, and you see some of the new generations. They're pretty good. Some of them are really innovative, pretty good. A lot of times they go under a lot of old school heads, and they learn from them, right? what I don't like is though is some of these youngsters coming out and disrespecting the old school. Some of the old OGs out here. Sometimes these youngsters will go, some of them will start like, barely in the 2000s or even in the 90s. They'll go under somebody who knew how to, some old school cat that knew, under their style, and then they'll come out and start dissing other old school cats or OGs out here, or they won't know about their style, right? And so, and then and they may get good, right? These new school guys, they may get good, but then they go and disrespect and and diss the old school, right? And I have a problem with that, where it's like you need to respect those who paved the way for you. And that's the only issue I have right there. And I see some of these guys like that. And so they need to give props what props is due, and everything. But yeah, man, popping is it's a cool thing, man. If you guys don't know what popping is, I mean, you probably seen it. Go check out movies like Breakin or Beat Street. Go look up some documentaries on it. Breaking, popping. Some people call it b-boying. I don't get all technical with all these terms. Some people are just like purists. Don't call it breakdancing, right? Call it b-boying, right? Some people get all technical about that, you know. But anyways, yeah. So I just wanted to mention that out here in the 818 San Fernando Valley in the 80s, we were popping, we were breaking. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There was whole culture doing that out here. A lot of us Mexicans out here. We had some blacks out here too, some Filipinos, some Samoans, you know. So, but there was popping and breaking back then. We were doing a lot of that everywhere out here. So if you hear some guy who claims to be an OG and he's saying there was no popping in the San Fernando Valley, well, that's not true. There was no breakdancing. That's not true. And there's a lot of famous people who came out of the San Fernando Valley. You know, I mean, there's a lot of legends that came out of the San Fernando Valley. A lot of history, here. And definitely, and we still hold it down too. We still have people out here popping and breaking, representing, you know. So, anyways, I guess I'm gonna end it here. So, if you guys want to learn some popping, different styles, I teach, fundamentals and waving, hitting, robot, cutting, gliding, even liquid. Even liquid comes from waving, right? Back then, we're just doing different movements, you know, that eventually, liquid and waving were hand to hand, right? Came out. Um, I even incorporate some boogaloo now, definitely. You know, I learned some boogaloo, taking classes there, the electric boogaloos. I do teach some of that as well. So if you want to get a hold of me, send me a message on Instagram. You got my Instagram down below, and check out my website. I'm out here in the San Fernando Valley. I do dance classes, private lessons as well, and definitely. And dance is good, man. You could you're never too young or too old to learn how to dance. I was really young when I started learning popping. Very young, very young, and I'm older now, and I'm still going at it. So, um, and it's good for you older folks out here too. Don't think you're too old, right? It's good exercise. It's good to move around. You know, I actually it's good for your health. It's good extracurricular activity too. It's fun. You enjoy the music. You get involved in a dance community. Learn those skills. If you're a beginner, it's fine, man. I actually teach a lot of beginners like good stuff. And what you do is this: you learn like different styles, fundamentals, and then you come up with your own style, right? You're not a copycat, right? You come up with your own style, your own moves, you mix it up, learn how to groove, learn how to move, learn how to flow from one style to another, all that stuff. But the key is to definitely work at a certain style and get good at it, work at another style, get good at it, and learn how to transition from those styles to another. That's the key out here, you know. Anyways, I guess I'm gonna let you guys go. And it was have a good day. You could get a hold of me at my Instagram, send me a message there, and visit my website. Anyways, you guys have a good day and see you later. And stay fresh. Or be fresh, right? Nah. Fresh is the word, right? A lot of people forget that word, right? Anyways, back in the days when something was dope, we would say, man, that's fresh, you know? Anyway, see you guys later. Have a good day.